All right. Hello, class. My name is Colton Reed. I'm doing a presentation for Professor Kehoe's class on the character of Charlemagne and his impact on European history. So let's get into it. All right, Charlemagne, and all the little things you need to know, blah, blah. All right, Charlemagne was born in the 1740s to a high-ranking council of the Frankish king, King Pippin III, the palace mayor, who at the approval of the Pope took the throne for himself and eventually handed it to his son Charlemagne. The interesting thing about the Frankish Empire at this time was that the palace mayor, though it sounds like a very minor role, was actually the shot caller. He was the big dog. And the king was kind of seen as a person who didn't have that much control, was just kind of there. It was just kind of like a ceremonial kind of a thing. But after Pippin, after generations of losing land, gaining it back, and all of this drama that had been taking place before Charlemagne entered the picture, he decided that it would just be a lot easier if he could consolidate his control, get rid of all of this ceremonial crap, and just rule for himself, which is what he does by the authority of the Catholic Church, which is going to be a major theme not only in Pippin's life, but then in his son's life. After the death of Pippin in 768, Charlemagne and his brother Carloman rule in tandem until Carloman's death, which is good for Charlemagne because the bros did not get along. Early rule. So once he had consolidated his rule from his brother, Charlemagne began conquest with neighboring lands. The idea of Christendom was a common theme in Charlemagne's life. He conquered and defended not just for the sake of conquering and defending, but to uphold this idea of Christendom, which I'll get into later. Because of this high regard of the idea of expanding Christianity, this makes the relationship between the Frankish king and the authority in Rome much more tight. So the Pope and Charlemagne are always going to be buds. Conquest. So, like I said, Charlemagne was known for his conquest. He was a warrior king, so it's no surprise that this is a huge part of his legacy, probably the biggest part of his legacy. He attacked the Saxons for their constant raids, and also to depaganize them. He saw them as like barbaric, unenlightened people, and he wanted to change that. Probably good intentions, but very violent decisions being made here. The Saxons are going to be a major thorn in his side. He's not going to be able to conquer them for many years, and it was only able to by pretty much murdering hundreds of Saxon captives, to where the Saxon leaders conceded to prevent any more innocent killings. He came to the Pope's aid multiple occasions. The most notable one is when he, like his father, attacked the Lombards, who were controlling most of northern Italy, who were threatening the power of the Pope. So he really puts the final nail in the coffin for these Lombards, and they're no longer a really big part of the picture after him. And he takes that land that the Lombards controlled, and he takes some of it for himself, but he gives a lot of it to the Pope himself to be able to have this kind of like buffer zone, sphere of influence for the church to have to maintain that peace that the church needs to be able to continue its rule. So Charlemagne really has a huge impact on the church itself by making it stable and safe. And this is going to be a huge part of European culture, of course. Much of the expansions were made east of the modern French border. He conquered places such as Bavaria, Croatia, and southern Italy. But it's not just to there. In his later life, he also resumes his conquests. He takes control of Brittany, right over here, and parts of Spain as well. So this is a huge spot, or huge swath of Europe, and he's really going to shape what European culture is going to look like for the centuries to come. All right, so now we're getting into a little bit of drama. In 800, Pope Leo III really cements his bromance with Charlemagne by crowning him Roman Emperor? Question mark? After assisting him maintain peace in Rome yet again. Now this is questionable because this lady over here is the Roman Emperor. During the time she controlled what was we now consider the Byzantine Empire, but it's still very much the seat of the Roman Emperor. So it's kind of awkward, and it really goes to show how far the schism between the East and the West of the Church really became. So much so that the West just completely disregards any legitimacy to the throne by just handing it to Charlemagne. Now, despite this awkward situation, the two kingdoms never really duke it out in any way, and they're even able to work together in some instances. So, Charlemagne was not just a warrior king. He also saw much value in education, and he oversaw a lot of reforms in that regard. His main idea with education reform was to strengthen the idea of Christendom on an intellectual level. He thought if the people know what they believe, if they aren't just told what to believe, that will strengthen the idea of Christendom. You want to make it stronger, people will know the life of Jesus, the life of the saints, and it'll all be well. And Charlemagne himself was a lifelong learner and intellectual, and that comes to a lot of surprise because he's very well known as this warrior king. So also with all of these reforms, we see a boost in the historical records. So after post-Charlemagne, historical records become much more easy to read, and the languages start to resemble the languages we use today more so than they did before Charlemagne. So we owe a lot of the clarity of the historical records post-Charlemagne to Charlemagne himself for inciting these reforms. Charlemagne's going to die in 1814, and he's going to leave his kingdom to Louis the Pious, and it's going to go into decline. He's not going to be able to maintain the huge swath of land that his dad was able to conquer, and by the time of Louis's death, he separates the kingdom into three between his three sons. Now, if you look at the map, you'll notice that it resembles the modern borders of Europe much more than they did before the reign of Charlemagne. You can see the Dutch border right here. That's pretty close to what it is today. And the French border, it's not quite there, but you get the idea. And then the Germanic influences of this swath of land right here. So the influence of Charlemagne is going to really set the boundaries for the cultural feels of Europe at the time. Not only is he going to protect the church and make sure that that is a staple for the culture of the continent of Europe, but he's also going to bring a lot of peace, or not peace necessarily, but a lot of stability to these cultures so that they can build their identities. And this is why Charlemagne's rule is so important and honestly really cool. Yeah, and that's it. Those are my works cited. Hope you liked it. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. Thanks. Bye.